Rabbin esenliği sizlerle olsun kardeşler. Bugün karşınızda olmak çok güzel. Burada kışın ortasında ama sıcacık bir Atlanta havasından sizlere selam olsun. Bugün yakın iki arkadaşım burada. Pastor Tim Bice ve Pastor Tony Merida. İkisi de Türkiye'ye defalarca geldiler. Bizi ziyaret ettiler. Bizlere beraber hizmet ettiler. Dolayısıyla dostluğumuz, arkadaşlığımız uzun yıllara dayanıyor. Ve bugün de açıkçası denk geldik. O ikisinin burada toplantıları vardı. Ben de 1-2 saat kuzeydeydim. Geçerken şöyle bir buraya da uğramadan edemeyeyim dedim. Uğramışken de şöyle onları sıkıştıralım istiyoruz. Özellikle vaaz konusuyla ilgili. Hem vaaz verme, bu kültürle ilgili hem de aynı zamanda cemaat adına vaazları iyi bir şekilde dinleyebilme, Tanrı sözünün altında oturabilme ile ilgili olarak. O zaman yavaş yavaş İngilizceye geçelim. Umarım altyazıdan rahat bir şekilde takip edebilirsiniz. So good to have you guys in my podcast.
Yeah.
It's something that I've been thinking, but we talk about this before. I'm a really perfectionist, so I never been happy about the audio, never happy about the video, and I'm like, it's been 5 years I was planning. It seems like I'm never gonna be able to do it if I don't start. So I'm like, the quality of the production might not be best, but hopefully this will be a blessing to so many people. So good to have you guys, and
Good to be with you.
Yeah, man.
and I have a few questions that I'd like to be talking with you. And I shared in Turkish, so this today is going to be a bit about from perspective to looking from pulpit down to the church, but also from church looking to the preacher over there. So I wanted to learn a little bit about your practices as a preacher. How do you choose your main text, the passage, and week after week? So what is the process for you guys and for your elders at your church?
I'll start. We typically preach through books of the Bible, and so it's really simple. It's whatever is next, and so we will outline the book and decide, how many weeks we want to preach. A lot of that will depend on how the book of the Bible is breaking down, or maybe not. It may not be the entire book of the Bible. Maybe we're going to do a portion of Acts or Genesis or whatever. But we like to preach sequentially through a book or a portion of a book of the Bible. It's not the only thing we do, but that's the normal thing we do. So we have an annual retreat usually where we're planning like a year in advance. And I lead that part of our meeting. I've already been thinking through that a lot before we have that planning meeting. And usually I'm presenting the idea of this is what we'll do this year. It always comes with a sense of we're open to change that at any point. We're not strictly bound to this plan. If something comes up or we feel like we need to address something else. But for us, that year-long plan in advance is very helpful. So I don't sit around wondering on a Monday or Tuesday or, God forbid, Saturday, what text am I preaching on? We know, at least I may not have the sermon, but I at least know where we're going well in advance. And I think that's very helpful, especially if you're particularly if you are a very busy pastor, maybe you have another job, or maybe you're not even a pastor and you're having to fill in at a church. Maybe you're a deacon or a lay person. I would just say pick Philippians, pick Ephesians, pick a book of the Bible, and just work through it systematically. And what will also help you is that you'll be able to use a lot of previous weeks' context and thoughts because you're in the same book, and that's going to also make your sermon prep process a lot easier.
It's very helpful.
I just follow him, whatever he's doing. We just do the next year. No, I'm joking. Very similar. I would say if you could have your sermons done in advance like that, like we try to stay 18 to 12 months ahead. Our whole church leadership gets behind it. They get excited. They have direction from community groups to music. So that it's not just you're preparing sermons, you're preparing your leaders to lead in the context of what you're preaching. And I'd also add, for me anyway, I'm always looking at what does our church need? And I'll give you an example. I wanted our church to understand a little bit more about church planting. And so this year I did a series about the kingdom of God because I felt like that would help them understand, hey, we're kingdom people and church planting is a kingdom thing. And so and that's going into next year. And so that determines what books I'll teach through, which will be Matthew, Kingdom Living, and then 1 Timothy, the church within the kingdom. But getting it all planned out is super helpful.
Yeah.
For sure.
Do you ever break that in,
Yeah.
Yes.
not as in planning? For example, something really severely happened in the country
yeah.
and all
Yes.
that. So you're like, you know what, I need to actually.
Yes.
Yeah. I think it's important to be flexible as a pastor. Stuff comes up, crisis, hurricanes,
Yeah,
national crisis, COVID.
yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So we always reserve the right to change.
Those are more like
plan.
principles to play out.
We say we plan in pencil.
Okay,
Yeah,
I see what you mean.
We're free to erase.
Yep.
Yeah, you can change
But,
it.
yeah.
I'll put in like a margin to
Yeah.
3 or 4 Sunday, maybe more than that.
Yeah, I do
Maybe
that.
5, which it says open.
Open.
And I can move things
Yep.
around if need be.
I think I would say that the same thing for us. It's not that far down, but we do like a 4 months planning, sometimes 5-6 months, according to our team. If they're going to be like this year I was here in America for about 5 months, and it just changed the entire dynamic so that we needed to plan a little longer than that. But in Turkey, most of the churches, not just in Turkey but around the world, it's almost like, what am I going to do next Sunday? I think this puts also a lot of stress, as you were just saying. Like Monday, I'm like, what am I going to do? Until you figure it out, it's Friday already, right? You're praying and thinking, and I think that what I find sometimes that this type of preaching, just from the books, you put yourself a boundary in a sense that you don't preach something that's hurtful to the church, or you're not purposely doing it.
Yeah.
Like, oh, let me target that type of person. If people
exactly.
feel offended, it's like, no, it's my text for
What's
this
next?
Sunday.
Yeah.
It's been 4 months ahead. I knew this was that. I think I find it pretty helpful as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it builds real credibility with your people to do that because they see you don't have an agenda.
Yeah.
You don't have you're not angry. You're not targeting them or whatever. Like your role is basically just to say, "Thus says the Lord," on this particular passage, and I think that also is going to help the church because you will get a better sense of the whole counsel of God rather than just the pastor's pet topics, that he wants to talk about all the time.
Yeah.
And I think that's also important. So we try to go genre to genre, kind of Old Testament, New Testament, some kind of rhythm like that.
I see.
And because I do want to expose people, we tend to think of like a 3 to 4 year window of time of what do we want to kind of cover because we have a very transient congregation, a lot of students, a lot of people coming into Raleigh, leaving, and that kind of thing. So if I'm going to take a book like Exodus, I don't want to spend 3 years on it, and so I have to figure out how do I want to cover it because I'd like to then expose them to a portion of the Gospel of John or Ephesians or whatever.
Yeah, that's very helpful. I want to ask one question that will be kind of like to help the people and listeners, specifically church members or people who are there. So what are the things tips that you can give our leaders to be able to think about how to easily communicate their points? What are the things that in your sermons that clear and easy way to follow your words? And what I mean with that, from looking from the pastor's perspective, what are you doing that it is like, you know what, I find this is very helpful to be able to communicate with our church, and they really appreciated that to learn it this way. I think that everybody has a different learning style, but some tips are always really helpful, I think.
Yeah. You want to jump in?
Simplicity. And I learned this from Tony. What's the point of the text? How do I relate that in everyday language today? Crossing the principalizing bridge, right? All that stuff, and saying, this is what this text means for us today. I don't know how much, you're way smarter than me, so it probably takes you 5 minutes, it takes me 5 hours. But like, I really spend a lot of time on that main point of the text. A lot, or the sermon. And it provides simplicity and clarity.
And then do you run that down the sermon?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I keep repeating it like a hammer hitting a nail Every time I say it, I feel like it drives it deeper.
Do you repeat like a certain sentences? I have
Yeah,
a
simple,
pastor friend who
short.
does that like almost
Yes.
4 or 5 times.
Yes.
At least you don't take anything from the sermon. Take this sentence.
That's,
out of it,
yeah, because they're not going to remember everything.
exactly. Yeah.
But if you say that over and over and over again, especially if you can, say it in a catchy way, is helpful.
Yeah.
Then the other thing I'd say is, I was telling Tony earlier, we have a friend who says an outline for your congregation is like a hug. Like they feel loved.
Yeah.
Because you're really trying to give them something to hang on to.
It's good.
There's, simple, short too is another thing.
Yeah.
Preach short.
I think that the sermon has like ups and downs, right? So you like different theologians says view differently. You take it low to all the way to the high, and then slowly finish it or something like that. I love to start high to make it like, oh, they just like say a story, like really dramatic story, wake people up or something icebreaker. They're like, hey, we're going, and then get into the meaty parts of the things, and those are like a small personal connection has been really helpful. I know that you are doing it a lot with. You don't tell like alone stories, or often that you're saying something like a small joke or something, maybe like a 2-liners or something like that, but wake people up and then carry on. I experience that a lot with your speeches.
Yeah, I work on that a lot. I mean, I'm always trying to. So I started preaching at youth camps, youth events, and I still to this day I'm looking at the back row when I preach. I have to force myself to look in the front because I was always trying to reach the kids in the back. And so a lot of my preaching just comes out of that background. So I was trying to grab their attention. I was trying to show them this is why this is important, or why this relates to them, why they should listen. So yeah, it doesn't have to be funny. It doesn't have to be the same thing every week, but something. Introduction is like the porch on a house. It's inviting. It's welcoming people in. It doesn't need to be too long. It would be strange to have a big porch in a small house, or you might think of it like a sunrise. We generally like introductions. That's the way creation works. We hate abrupt, like alarm clocks. We hate that. So I do like to provide. I call it expositional hospitality. Like when someone comes over to your house, you're explaining where the bathrooms are and like what the menu is. At the beginning, I want to get everybody in. I want everybody to know this is where we're going. This is how we're going to proceed. This is why this is really good. This is a good week for you to be here. That kind of thing. Those are some of the things in the introduction that I'm trying to do. And then like Tim, I'm trying to cast a vision for what's the big idea that we're trying to communicate.
You always do it at the start that people understand where they're going?
Yeah, I do.
Especially if you can tie a story into that, where it ties into the main idea.
Yeah.
Is
So
really
people
good.
know this is where
because-
we're going to end
right,
up.
because
This is
the way I think about it is I want that big idea actually to be the answer to the tension in their mind that I open with. And what I mean by that is, if you use the front porch, like if you walk up to someone's front porch, what's on that porch that makes them want to go inside?
Yeah.
Man, this porch is this cool. What's it like on the inside? Yeah. But then you can even ask questions like, how many of you just feel like you haven't had joy in the last week, month, year?
Yeah, good
There are
question.
people there, they automatically know, oh man, I need this. And then you hit them with the main point. Let's just say it's out of Philippians.
Yeah.
So you can have fullness of joy in Christ your Lord, or whatever, something like that.
Yeah.
But the rest of the sermon, you're exegeting, but you're also like hammering that main idea that they can leave with.
Yeah, no, the only thing I would add there on the main point is then let your outline be in alignment with that main point, right? So you can even write your main point to where some of the language drips down into the outline, so that the idea is that your sermon is a coherent whole. It's one sermon. It's not 5 sermons,
Yeah.
which can happen with some outlines where you go in every direction under the sun. So you've got to decide as a preacher, like what doesn't belong in this sermon,
Yes.
what doesn't fit in this dominant theme that we're driving home. I just think it's more effective to have one big idea and drive it home than have a bunch of scattered
Yeah.
thoughts.
That's very helpful.
I think I've heard you do it before, but I've done this before too. Like I'll have sort of like a compound sentence
Yeah,
for my main point, and those end up being my 2 points.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
You can have joy, point one. Number two, how in the Lord. You know,
Yeah.
something like that.
Something simple, clean.
Simple.
Well, you Americans
simplicity.
often like I put like a, let's say 4 T's or 5 N's. So like they love,
Yeah.
American audience loves that.
We like
you know.
alliteration. Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that I try to do is that I have kind of created this questionnaire, and to be honest, like learn from you guys and different pastors, like what are the things that I am missing at the sermon after I prepare a sermon, like I'm done pretty much. Which I know that it's okay, it's this get together, but I have a questionnaire about like 15 questions that I'm making sure, did I communicate this clearly, the main point, or did I give enough connection points where people can catch up? And also in Turkish people, sometimes they're not really following clearly things. It's I think that just the Western civilization, the developed education is different. So I need to, if they're lost, you need to be able to find them to get back to the main road again. So I'm like, hey, just come back. Like you might be lost, but here we are again. So I'm kind of like question after like I'm like, oh, I forget. I'm very weak on that point. I find that's quite helpful for my. Of course, it's my question. People can change that. I would definitely wanted to point this out in my sermon. That's all. But so, Tony, this is a question for you. So we know. I mean, I think that we both Tim and I agree. You are one of the best preachers alive today. You don't be humble.
I don't know if he agrees.
He's
with
the
that.
guy. He's the guy.
So people who are listening to us might not know, but we are three of us. We enjoy our times together.
What's your question?
I heard that you are much better in preaching in Turkish people rather than America. Is that correct?
Oh wow, I did not know that.
Yeah. Well, because I'm translating for you, and they say
I
that
see
it's
what
like
you're saying.
There it is.
I'm fixing some of the things and help you
Yeah.
out when you're making
Yeah.
mistakes.
That's right.
So it's almost like you might be the best preacher ever if your sermons are in Turkish.
You
What do you
turned
say?
my egg into an omelet. Yeah.
So I seriously, like you, it's not a joke, but you're really like, to be honest, I totally agree with that. You're known, your book obviously about the preaching has been used everywhere. You come and actually lead our Turkish pastors about the preaching class as well. And Tim did the pastoral theology the same week. It was one of the best class ever. And I wanted to know that, what are the things that technically that you're doing that you find you're doing that other people do not do? What are the tips in that sense? Like what you put most thoughts and brain? I'm sure you're praying through this. I know that you're sometimes starting like 10 days before, even before you're preaching your sermon, you're already start working for 2 weeks ago. So we talk about these things before, but what would you actually suggest? Like this has been great, really helpful for me to build me as a preacher.
I mean, I've grown through the years, so I mean, if you would have watched my early sermons, you would have. I'm glad they're not on the internet. They were so bad. So
One with the chin goatee, that's a famous era.
Yeah, the famous era, famous error. Yeah. I have. There's a cumulative effect of years of sermon preparation and delivery. You just get better. You get more familiar with the Bible. You get a better handle on how to deliver sermons in a way that's effective and faithful. So some of it's just straight up experience. You just live longer. You keep doing it, and things will come a lot more instinctive, a lot more natural, and it will be less of a grind. When I first started preaching, it was staring at a blank page thinking, what on earth am I going to do? That's not the case now. I think I could say a lot to that question, but the thing most recently that I've done that I didn't used to do is advanced sermon prep. Now, I haven't written on this. I mean, this was post-preaching book. I don't think I've even written a blog on this, but over the last 2 years, I've been writing sermons weeks and weeks and weeks in advance. So I am into April of next year. Like we're recording this in November. And so,
So your 6 months sermon already prepped?
yeah, no, let me explain it a bit. It's not 100% done, but what I do is, and I started doing this mainly first out of necessity because my travel schedule picked up tremendously, and I used to do the bulk of my sermon prep on Monday, and my Mondays are often eaten up now with travel. So I'm like, I lost Monday. It's my key day. Some of my other days in the church are meetings, staff meetings, and so I've got to get out in front of Monday even. So, you know, I would bore you to death if I told you all the details of how I do this, but I'm essentially trying to write about an 80% done draft of sermons a semester ahead of time.
Is that more like an outline so you kind of juice it in like the stories and stuff?
It's an actual manuscript.
Yeah.
But what I do is I insert placeholders. So if I'm working through the text, it takes me 2 days to write a sermon, basically. I don't need 2 full days. I just need 2 days with some chunks of time to be 75% done, right? First day is usually the hard exegesis into the text, trying to sculpt the outline. Day 2 is when I can just compose the sermon. And I don't allow myself in advance prep to get blocked. So if I just get stuck, I just do a copy and paste. I do something. And I say the week of, or when it gets closer, I'll tighten this up. I'll edit this. So I may think, man, I need an illustration here. I don't have one that's coming to mind. So, but I don't want to spend 2 hours thinking about an illustration when I'm 6 months in advance, or 3 months in advance. So I'll just grab Kent Hughes's commentary. That's a good illustration, and I'll have something better later. You know what I'm saying?
You're filling it there, but something better will. You already is in your mind.
Yeah.
Something's gonna better will come.
And so all of that then is on my iPad. I got all these sermons, and I go to a conference. I go to this. I read a book. Whatever. I'm immediately thinking that goes right in that sermon.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Like that March, I'm going to be talking about that.
Exactly.
That's a great illustration.
And so I'm thinking that. So I feel like my sermons have gotten a lot better, largely because I'm more out in front, and it also has removed stress, like the weekly sermon stress is really gone, because now I sit down on Monday morning early with my iPad and a sermon that's 80% done, and I'm just letting it internalize in my heart. And I'll edit the whole thing. I mean, I'll still have a better way to say this. But I get to spend the week more editing and more getting it in my soul to preach it than doing the hard work of writing it the week of. So that's, I think, helped my preaching a lot. And, everybody else appreciates that. The sermon, the worship team prep, all of the other components of our church life benefit from that kind of thing. So that's something that I do these days.
Yeah. How about you, Tim? So what are you would say that important practices? You've been obviously preaching for many years. What are things that actually help you out? And
I'm going to give you 2 in 1. On Sunday morning, I get up really early, go to the church, actually pray. I pray in the auditorium over all the seats first. Gets my heart prepared. I go to my office, and I'm doing 2 things when I pull out the sermon. I am internalizing it by preaching it through, and I'm editing it. What doesn't have to be here, and I time it, and I'm aiming for 30 minutes, knowing I'll probably do 32, 33.
do you actually preach?
I do it out loud,
so that
in my office.
You know how long it's going to be.
Yep, at least twice. I want to be able to go.
I bet that Tony never does that.
He's smarter than me. Again, so
he just gets
I
up
go
and
up,
I would say most of my friends do that.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
especially if I can do it 3 times, I can. It's memorized.
You know where you're going.
Yeah.
And so I can glance down at my notes.
Yeah.
And sometimes I don't even have to do that.
Yeah.
But I've also cut the fluff. Like this, the text even, it's not even, this is my pet peeve here. I don't need to talk about this. Or the text is not really speaking to this issue. I want to talk about it, but I don't have to. I just want to say what the Bible says. That's the time to do that. So I'm doing 2 things: internalization and also editing to get it down. And again, it goes back to the first question you asked. How can you do this better? Well, keep it shorter. It's helpful.
This is very very helpful. So I want to talk about. It's almost like I wanted to break this into 2 points. Now we talk about preaching and specifically from the pulpit. I think I would like to break this session into the 2 sections. Let me ask you one more question on this first section. Specifically, most people in Turkey or Turkic countries that they did not have education like that, or they're struggling to find good materials and all that. What would be a suggestion that you guys can give for those new, some of them young preachers to actually prepare for it? Because that's one of the main struggles when they're preparing it. What would be a simple way for them? Of course, with the AI developing, the translation things getting better and better, and we're working on that. Hopefully that we will have so many more good materials in Turkish. But also, again, I was talking a little bit about education is different here and how you guys think certain things. I'm just realizing that's not how we think, So what would be helpful for new preachers to look and study or think and pray would be helpful for them. So it's like first year that they're going, how would you encourage them to step into the preaching?
I think this sounds very basic, but read the Bible a lot. Read and reread and reread. If you're preaching through, say, a book of the Bible, and you're on a particular passage, just to get super familiar with that passage, I would begin by making observations of what's there. Don't try to be clever, just what's the verb tense, who are the people, what's happening, what's the repeated words.
Would you have any questions for those? Looking at the passage, what are the questions that you would ask to that passage?
Yeah, just
Who, what, where, why, when, how.
Yeah.
It's like what is it in Turkish that we have 5 and 1K? Do you have something like that? Why, what? It's like you guys have why, what, which, and like
we would call that observation.
Yeah, so you basically write it down.
Yep.
Work on the verbs so that you know that's where the text is
surrounding
going.
context. What I want to get to is what's the main idea here, and then I want that to drive my sermon. So I don't think you don't need commentaries for this. You actually don't need a lot of resources. What you just need are some basic tools of interpretation, and start applying them over and over and over and over again to where it becomes normal. The commentaries can help you. The resources can help you. Certainly helps me. It can help check your work, make sure you're not way out in almost a left field, but that's baseball.
Yeah.
So whatever soccer is.
Right wing, let's say.
Okay. And then I moved from observation to interpretation. So now it's like the more difficult questions. From your observation phase, you got questions that are unanswered. Well, what does that mean? These kinds of things. That's a whole lecture on how we get to deal with difficult to interpret passages. But you're in that stage of trying to wrestle with Paul or wrestle with the Gospels or whatever. And then I moved to a question that's more theological, which is like, how is the gospel present here? What's the gospel theme that's in this passage? And then I'm thinking about how does this apply to the congregation, right? All of that is just what I call step 1 Bible study. And that's a lot of time. That's, it's edifying time. It's a wonderful time. And after that, then I want to identify what's the big idea. That's stage 2, based on my Bible study. So what's going to be the main point of this sermon? And then I want to construct an outline, stage 3, that supports the main idea, that reflects the main idea. The outline, basically, you want it to reflect the passage and be suitable to the audience. So you don't have to be overly clever. Nobody really cares how unique your outline is. They just need an outline. They need some way to follow you. It's a hug, And then I'm trying to decide, after I have this outline and it's reflecting the text, I'm basically asking what needs to be explained in each point, what needs to be applied, and is there an illustration that I can use?
Okay.
And when I first started preaching, I literally wrote that in my sermon manuscript. explanation
That's
in
good.
bold.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
So you want to fill it there.
What am I
basically.
explaining? You know,
Well, say it again. Your explanation.
uh-huh.
What is the second one?
Application.
Application. How are we going to apply this to the congregation? And if there's any story and type
yeah.
things, more like a
Yeah, application is another good word for it. I think is significance. So when you've explained what the text meant, so it's past tense, like, you know, here's what Paul means. Now the question is, why does that matter? Why is it significant? So I would write explanation, application, Yeah, and that sometimes will take thought. I mean, that takes prayer. That takes. Sometimes you got to think like a missionary. It's cultural. You know, it's
you try to
pastoral.
contextualize that's
Yes.
what happened in the history and like what does it this is mean for my church, right?
100%. And then you may or may not have an illustration. You don't have to have an illustration in every point, but illustrations can be helpful because they bring stuff to light. They show how it works in real life. You know, I work really hard in illustration, and then I'm just working that system. Now I might do that process 2 or 3 times actually under each point. So it just kind of depends on how it's flowing, because you know when you're writing a sermon, you're writing for listeners, not readers. So sometimes when you're in the writing moment, you need to imagine or think about how I'm communicating to people. And it might be you need to go explanation, illustration, application. Maybe I start first with an illustration, you know, or you can work through those 3 categories, however works best, you know.
If you preach them to yourself, you'll really because
Helps.
yeah, because I go from writing, so you know, words like typing them out to verbal processing, and I hear it. I'm like, I think it would hit better, like you say. I'm going to put the illustration here. You know.
Yeah. And then I do an introduction and a conclusion after that. Those are to complete the process. But
You always do. I know that's
mine.
always finishing up the introduction and the last words.
Last
Do you? So let me ask that. Do you bring the specifically gospel toward the end part, like the challenge, and focus on the gospel toward the end of it, or after every? You know, obvious application is bring the gospel, but I'm just saying with much more clear, open words. Do you do that toward the end of it, alongside
so
with the
for me,
challenge?
I know guys who do that. That's fine. I like to preach the gospel where it's most natural to do it in the sermon. So if the text, if you're in verse 2 and there's a clear gospel theme, idea, like I'm not going to wait to point 3 to like hammer the gospel. I'm going to hammer it then. I really do it all.
You let the text shape
Yeah.
the sermon.
But I really do it the entire sermon, even in the introduction. Like you're trying to offer some hope, some gospel hope, some reason why this is important. You know what I'm saying? That we got good news to share with you today.
You know, I preached in Manchester once, and I was just like, I don't remember. It was like the first 3 points. I'm just like ripping people apart, right? Just like, and then like I'm gonna bring the hope in the end. It's like 20 minutes. I have another 25. I'm coming there, right? I'm coming there, and the fire alarm goes, and then it's like a middle of winter, and I never seen 250 people left the room in 20 seconds. Like in Turkey, if that fire alarm goes, until you see a smoke or something, nobody's gonna move, right? This British people just run outside, and they were renting this facility, so we had certain times where we'd be outside in the freezing winter for 40 minutes. Nobody has jackets, and we come back inside. I asked the pastor, I'm like, I know that you're renting it, so we need to be away. Like, how long I have a time? He's like, like maybe 3 to 5 minutes. I'm like, what? Like I offer no hope, no encouragement, nothing. I just like rip them apart. Like it's kind of like the text was kind of heavy on the church. I think one of the 7 churches that I was preaching to, the first few points were really harsh. But the text was like that. Like in the end, there was a hope coming. But I realized that at that moment, like
one way
can happen.
One way to help with that, I think, is if you want to, in the introduction, tell people where you're going. Like if you're given your outline in advance, then there's a certain sense.
To be honest, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to kind of like, you keep it like an
That's
excitement.
a good Presbyterian.
You keep it like a secret until the, open it up. It's like, It did not work out that time.
In the academy, do you have a class on biblical theology?
We do, yeah.
I think pointing people to that so that like when you
Huge,
do open the Bible
Yeah.
and read it, you've got a framework.
Yeah.
And you know how to work themes. You know that
Yeah.
Christ is present throughout all of the scriptures, and to me that's been super helpful over the years.
100%.
Just thinking through that lens. Of biblical
Yeah, we
theology.
actually have a now. I know Tim knows. I don't know if I share with you that we started a certificate program, kind of like I did, right? So this online program that people are going in. The first class being the biblical theology. It's just pure explanation. He's the professor from the Bethlehem College and Seminary, and just going through the entire Bible in a very good level that anybody can take it well. It kind of gives them a good perspective. And then we have hermeneutics after that. Dr. Phillips is his class. So those are like a two basic class for them to kind of prepare them for any Christian. It doesn't have to be preachers, basically. Okay, this is good. You're not leaving anywhere, but I want to make sure that we recorded these things, and
Okay.
it's going to be the first part. Let's give a 5 minutes break, and let's go to the second part, looking from church to the pulpit and how we can talk about that.
Sounds
Okay?
good.